She said, "Go ahead and leave, you'll come crawling back like you always do," after another toxic meltdown. I replied, "Not this time." 3 months later, when she saw how much I'd changed, her confidence shattered completely. 3 years with Jenna had taught me to recognize the warning signs. The particular way her jaw tightened when she scrolled through my phone, the silence that stretched too long when I mentioned work, the accusatory questions disguised as casual conversation. I'd been a quality inspector at Brennan Manufacturing for 6 years, steady work that paid for my modest apartment and weekend fishing trips. But Jenna had a way of making everything feel insufficient, especially me. The laptop incident started like most of our fights, with her rifling through my work emails while I was in the shower, convinced she'd finally find proof of whatever betrayal she'd constructed that week. "Who the hell is Claire?" she screamed the moment I walked into the living room, my Dell laptop raised above her head like a weapon. 3 years I've wasted on you, and you're screwing around with some woman at work." I stood there dripping wet in just a towel, watching my $1,200 laptop hovering dangerously close to destruction. "Claire Henderson is my supervisor," I said carefully. "She's 52 years old, Jenna. Been married 30 years and has grandchildren." But logic had never been Jenna's strong suit during her episodes. "Oh, so now you're into older women? I saw the way you typed her name, all careful and respectful. You never type my name like that." The laptop came down with a sickening crack against the hardwood floor, sending plastic shards across the room and 3 years of work files into electronic oblivion. I stared at the wreckage, my spreadsheets, quality reports, photos from last year's fishing trip with my dad, all gone because Jenna had convinced herself that professional emails with a grandmother were evidence of an affair. "Claire shows me pictures of her granddaughter's soccer games during lunch breaks," I said, my patience finally cracking. "If you spent 5 seconds thinking instead of assuming the worst about everything I do, maybe you'd realize how insane this sounds." Her eyes filled with tears, the manipulation tears that usually made me feel guilty. "I just love you so much it scares me," she whispered. "I can't stand the thought of losing you to someone else. You're all I have, Marcus. Without you, I'm nothing." And there it was, the script we'd followed for 3 years. She'd create chaos, destroy something important, then collapse into vulnerability that made me feel like the monster for being upset about perfectly reasonable things like not wanting my laptop smashed. Usually, this was where I'd apologize for making her feel insecure and spend the next week walking on eggshells until the cycle started again. But standing there looking at my destroyed computer, something shifted. Maybe it was the replacement cost I'd be facing, or maybe it was finally seeing the pattern clearly, but I felt the exhaustion of carrying someone else's chaos for so long. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my apartment. Take your stuff and leave. I'm done." She started crying harder. "Marcus, please, I'm sorry. I'll pay for a new laptop. I just got scared because you invented a problem that doesn't exist and destroyed my property over it. This is the 4th time this year you've broken something of mine during one of your episodes." I walked to my bedroom, put on clothes, and grabbed my truck keys while she followed me around, alternating between apologies and accusations. "Fine, leave," she finally screamed as I headed for the door. "Run away like you always do. But don't come crawling back to me when you realize what you've lost." I sat in my truck outside her townhouse for 20 minutes, engine running, knowing she was watching from her window and waiting for me to come back inside like I always did. The pattern was so established that she probably had her apology speech ready, the one where she'd explain how her behavior was actually proof of how much she loved me. But instead of walking back up her steps, I drove to REI. I'd been meaning to get back into hiking for years, something I'd loved in college before Jenna decided that outdoor activities were just excuses for men to avoid their responsibilities at home. The outdoor gear store was busy with people who looked genuinely happy, couples planning weekend adventures instead of weekend arguments. "I'd like to sign up for your hiking club," I told the girl at the customer service counter, surprising myself with how good it felt to make a decision without checking with someone first. "Great. We meet every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. for different trails around the area. All skill levels welcome." As I filled out the paperwork, I realized this was the first thing I'd signed up for in 3 years that Jenna hadn't pre-approved, criticized, or found some way to make about herself. My phone buzzed with increasingly frantic texts, but I turned it off and drove home to my peaceful, laptop-less apartment, already looking forward to Saturday morning in ways I hadn't looked forward to anything in longer than I cared to admit. Saturday morning at Cascade Trail felt like stepping into a different universe, one where people smiled without agenda and made conversation without ulterior motives. The hiking group was about 15 people ranging from college age to retirees, all gathered around the trailhead with genuine enthusiasm for spending 3 hours walking through the woods instead of analyzing each other's text message response times. I'd been bracing myself for awkward small talk and inevitable questions about why a guy my age was joining solo, but everyone just seemed happy to have another person along. "First time with our group?" asked a woman about my age with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing well-broken-in hiking boots that suggested she actually used them regularly. "Yeah, I'm Marcus. Just getting back into hiking after taking a break from it for a while." "Amy," she said, extending her hand with a firm shake. "I'm a veterinarian over at the animal clinic on Maple Street. What do you do?" The question was asked with genuine curiosity, not the calculating tone I'd grown accustomed to from Jenna, who always seemed to be evaluating whether someone's job made them worth her time. "Quality inspector at Brennan Manufacturing." Not exactly exciting, but I like the problem-solving aspect of it. "That sounds really interesting actually. I bet you catch things other people miss." It was such a simple statement, but hearing someone express genuine interest in my work instead of dismissing it as boring felt almost foreign. We ended up hiking together for most of the 3-mile trail, talking about everything from her work with rescue animals to my college days when I'd hiked every weekend. She didn't once check her phone, didn't interrupt my stories to tell better ones about herself, didn't make me feel like I was auditioning for her approval. When I mentioned I'd been out of practice with hiking, she offered practical tips about gear and local trails without making me feel incompetent. "You should definitely come next week," she said as we reached the parking lot. "We're doing Pine Ridge Trail. It's got these amazing views of the valley." For the first time in years, I found myself looking forward to weekend plans that didn't involve walking on eggshells or managing someone else's emotions. My phone had stayed blissfully silent all morning, and I'd actually forgotten about Jenna's drama for 3 straight hours. A personal record. That peace lasted exactly until I got home and turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and a voicemail that started with sobbing and escalated to accusations that I was probably hiking with some slut I'd met online. The final text, sent just 20 minutes earlier, was the ultimatum I'd been expecting. "If you really loved me, you'd choose me over your stupid hiking club. Prove you're committed to us. Skip next Saturday and spend the day with me instead. This is your chance to show me I matter more than strangers." I stared at the message for a long time, remembering Amy's easy laughter on the trail, the way she'd offered to share her trail mix without keeping score, how natural it felt to have a conversation with someone who wasn't constantly testing my loyalty. Then I did something I'd never done before. I typed back a simple response: "No. I'm going hiking next Saturday, and every Saturday after that. Don't contact me again." Before I could second-guess myself, I blocked her number on everything: phone, social media, email. The silence that followed felt like taking off shoes that had been too tight for 3 years. Tuesday afternoon, I was grabbing coffee at the place near work when a guy about my age approached my table with the kind of nervous energy that meant he had something important to say. "Excuse me, are you Marcus? I'm sorry to bother you, but I think we need to talk. I'm Daniel, Jenna's ex before you." I looked up from my laptop, immediately recognizing him from photos I'd seen on Jenna's social media. She'd dated him for about 2 years before we got together, and according to her version of events, he'd been an abusive, controlling asshole who couldn't handle her independence. "She's been posting about you on her Instagram stories," Daniel continued, sitting down without invitation. "Same patterns, same accusations, same victim narrative she used about me. I figured you might want to know what you're really dealing with." He pulled out his phone and showed me screenshot after screenshot of text messages, social media posts, and even emails Jenna had sent him for months after their breakup. Death threats, attempts to get him fired by calling his workplace with false allegations, showing up at his apartment at 3 a.m., creating fake dating profiles to catfish him, even following his family members on social media to gather information she could use against him. "She told me you were abusive," I said, studying the evidence. "Yeah, that's her go-to story. I was abusive because I asked her to pay her own car insurance. Same way you'll be abusive for asking her to respect basic boundaries." Daniel showed me a folder on his phone labeled Jenna Evidence, dozens of screenshots, police reports from when he'd filed for harassment, witness statements from neighbors who'd seen her slashing his tires. She cycles through guys every 2 to 3 years. Gets them isolated, dependent, then when they try to leave, she goes scorched earth. I'm talking restraining orders, false police reports, trying to destroy your reputation with anyone who'll listen. The conversation lasted 2 hours, with Daniel walking me through her entire playbook, how she'd isolate me from friends, monitor my communications, create crises that required me to prove my love through increasingly unreasonable sacrifices. Every single pattern he described, I'd lived through. The good news is, if you stay strong and don't give her any reaction, she'll eventually move on to someone new. Took about 4 months for her to leave me alone completely, but only because I documented everything and threatened legal action. As I walked back to work, Daniel's warnings echoing in my head, I realized I'd unknowingly made the smartest decision of my life by blocking her immediately and joining that hiking club. My phone buzzed with a text from Amy, looking forward to Pine Ridge Trail this Saturday. Weather's supposed to be perfect. I smiled, typing back, "Me too. Thanks for making me feel welcome." For the first time in 3 years, I was building something positive instead of just surviving something toxic. 2 weeks later, blocking Jenna's direct contact had given me a false sense of security. I'd forgotten how creative she could get when her primary manipulation channels were cut off. The first sign something was wrong came from my supervisor Claire, the same grandmother Jenna had convinced herself I was having an affair with. "Marcus, we need to talk," Claire said Monday morning, her usual warm demeanor replaced by professional concern. "I got a complaint about your conduct that I need to follow up on." I followed her into her office, genuinely confused about what workplace violation I could have possibly committed. "Someone called our HR hotline Friday claiming you've been making inappropriate comments about female employees and creating a hostile work environment. They said you've been bragging about manipulating women and showed them text messages as proof." The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. "Claire, you know that's not true. I barely talk to anyone here except you and the guys on my inspection team." "I know, Marcus. Your work's been excellent and I've never seen you be anything but professional. But I have to investigate any formal complaint." The caller knew details about your schedule, your truck, even mentioned that you'd been acting erratic lately due to personal problems. That's when it clicked. Did they mention my ex-girlfriend Jenna by any chance? Claire's expression shifted to understanding. They said they were a concerned coworker who'd witnessed this behavior, but they wouldn't give their name. "You think this is related to your breakup?" "Claire, my ex has been escalating her harassment since I cut contact. She's done this before to other guys she's dated. I can show you documentation if you need it." The investigation took 3 days, during which I felt like I was walking around with a target on my back. Then Claire called me into her office with what looked like relief on her face. "Good news. Security footage from last Tuesday shows someone matching your description of Jenna throwing rocks at our building around 11 p.m., then keying what appears to be your truck in the parking lot. The woman on the phone definitely wasn't an employee here." She showed me the grainy black and white footage on her computer screen, and there was Jenna clear as day, hurling landscaping stones at the manufacturing building like some kind of deranged vandalism spree before taking her keys to my truck's paint job. "I'm filing a police report and recommending you get a restraining order. This is way beyond normal breakup drama." But Jenna wasn't finished with just workplace sabotage. Thursday evening, my grandmother called in tears. "Marcus, honey, I'm so worried about you. Your friend Jenna reached out to me on Facebook and told me you've been having some kind of breakdown. She said you've been drinking heavily and talking about hurting yourself, and that your friends are really concerned but you won't accept help." My 73-year-old grandmother, who still sent me birthday cards with $20 bills and worried when I didn't call every Sunday, had been weaponized against me. "Grandma, I promise you I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. Jenna is my ex-girlfriend and she's been harassing me since we broke up. She's trying to manipulate you into pressuring me to contact her. But she seems so concerned, honey. She said she still loves you and just wants to make sure you're safe. She even sent me screenshots of text messages where you sounded really depressed." The fact that Jenna had created fake text conversations to convince my elderly grandmother I was suicidal was a new low, even for her. "Grandma, I need you to block her on Facebook and don't believe anything she tells you about me. I'm hiking every weekend, I got a promotion opportunity at work, and I'm happier than I've been in years. She's lying to try to get you to pressure me into talking to her." It took 20 minutes to convince my grandmother that I wasn't secretly falling apart, and another 10 to walk her through blocking Jenna on social media. Meanwhile, my phone had 3 missed calls from my aunt, 2 from my cousin, and a text from my dad asking if I needed to talk to someone about my situation. Jenna had systematically contacted my entire family with her sob story about my supposed mental health crisis. The police report took 2 hours to file, with Officer Martinez reviewing the security footage and Daniel's documentation about Jenna's pattern of harassment. Sir, this woman has escalated from property damage to involving your family members with false claims. That's a clear pattern of stalking behavior. We're issuing a no-contact order immediately, and I'd recommend documenting any future incidents. As I drove home, my phone rang with Amy's number. Hey, are you okay? I heard through the hiking group that you've been dealing with some ex-girlfriend drama. The concern in her voice was genuine, not the probing curiosity I'd grown used to from people who wanted gossip material. Yeah, it's been a weird week, but I'm handling it. Looking forward to Saturday's hike. I could use some normal human interaction. Well, if you need to talk or want to grab coffee before Saturday, just let me know. Sometimes it helps to have a friend who's not involved in the drama. A friend. Someone offering support without expecting anything in return, without trying to gather information to use later, without making my problems about themselves. After 3 years of Jenna's chaos, Amy's straightforward kindness felt revolutionary. Thanks, Amy. That actually sounds really good. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I noticed a car I didn't recognize parked near my building with someone sitting inside. The paranoia Jenna had created made me circle the block twice before parking, but the car was gone when I came back around. Whether it was her or just my imagination, I was done letting her chaos control my peace of mind. I had security footage, police reports, and a support system of normal people who didn't create problems for entertainment. For the first time since the laptop incident, I felt like I was winning. 6 weeks of blissful silence from Jenna had lulled me into thinking the worst was over, that maybe the no-contact order and police involvement had finally convinced her to move on. I'd been hiking every Saturday with Amy, gotten back into a normal routine at work, and even started sleeping through the night without checking my locks twice. Then my phone rang at 7:30 a.m. on a Tuesday with a number I didn't recognize, and Jenna's voice shattered my peace. Marcus, thank God you answered. I've been trying to reach you for days, but you blocked me everywhere. We need to talk immediately. I'm pregnant. The words hit me like ice water, not because I believed her, but because I knew exactly what kind of nuclear manipulation she was launching. Jenna, we haven't been together in 6 weeks, and we always used protection. If you're actually pregnant, it's not mine. How can you say that? Of course it's yours. I haven't been with anyone else since we broke up. I'm 8 weeks along, Marcus. You can do the math. I could do the math, and it conveniently aligned with right before our final fight, but I'd learned enough about Jenna's tactics to know that convenient timing was her specialty. If you're really pregnant, I'll need to see medical documentation from a doctor. Ultrasound images, blood test results, something official. You don't trust me? Your own girlfriend, the mother of your child, and you don't trust me? Ex-girlfriend, and no, I don't trust you. You've lied about everything from your work schedule to your credit card payments. A pregnancy claim is going to require actual proof. The ultrasound images arrived 2 hours later via text from yet another unknown number. Grainy black and white photos that looked official enough at first glance, complete with medical facility headers and date stamps. For about 30 seconds, I felt that gut punch panic of unplanned parenthood with someone I never wanted to see again. Then I forwarded the images to my sister Rachel, who'd been a registered nurse at the Women's Health Clinic downtown for 7 years. Her response came back in less than 10 minutes. Marcus, these are literally stock photos from a medical website. I've seen these exact images in training materials. The facility header doesn't even match any real clinics in our area. I stared at my phone, caught between relief and absolute amazement at Jenna's willingness to fake a pregnancy with stolen medical images. Rachel, can you send me documentation proving these are fake? Already on it. I'm emailing you links to the original stock photo sources and a statement from my clinic director. Armed with proof of Jenna's deception, I called her back. I know the ultrasound images are fake, Jenna. My sister is a nurse and she identified them as stock photos from medical websites. This conversation is over. Your sister is lying because she doesn't want you to be happy. Those images are real, Marcus. I'm carrying your baby and you're abandoning us. I hung up and immediately called Officer Martinez to report the fake pregnancy claim and fraudulent medical documents. For 3 days, my phone stayed mercifully quiet. Then my grandmother called Thursday evening, and I could hear shouting in the background. Marcus, honey, there's a young woman at my front door screaming about being pregnant with your baby. She says you're refusing to take responsibility and she needs me to convince you to do the right thing. Grandma, absolutely do not let her in. Lock your doors and call 911 right now. That's my ex-girlfriend Jenna and she's violating a restraining order. She's not pregnant. She faked medical documents to try to manipulate me. But she seems so upset, honey. She's crying and saying you're going to abandon your own child. The 20-minute drive to my grandmother's house felt like an hour, with Jenna's escalating voice audible in the background every time my grandmother and I spoke. By the time I pulled into the driveway, 3 police cars were already there with Jenna handcuffed in the back of one. Officer Martinez walked over as I got out of my truck. She was trespassing on private property, harassing an elderly woman, and violating the existing no-contact order. When we told her she was under arrest, she claimed to be pregnant and started screaming that you were trying to make her lose the baby through stress. The pregnancy is fake, I said, handing him the documentation Rachel had prepared. My sister's a nurse and proved the ultrasound images were downloaded from medical websites. He reviewed the evidence with a grim expression. This is way beyond normal breakup drama, sir. Making false pregnancy claims, fabricating medical documents, harassing elderly family members, she's looking at multiple charges. My grandmother emerged from her house looking shaken. Marcus, that poor girl seemed so convinced she was telling the truth. Are you absolutely sure she's not pregnant? Grandma, she faked the medical documents. She's been harassing me for 2 months with increasingly desperate lies. As the police cars pulled away with Jenna still claiming from the back seat that I was abandoning my unborn child, my grandmother shook her head in disbelief. In my day, people didn't lie about being pregnant just to manipulate someone. I spent an hour making sure my grandmother was okay and helping her change all her locks. As I drove home, I realized this arrest might finally be the wake-up call that convinced Jenna to move on, but somehow I doubted it. People who fake pregnancies don't usually develop sudden insight into appropriate boundaries. 2 weeks after Jenna's arrest, I was finally starting to believe that maybe jail time had shocked her into moving on with her life. The restraining order had been upgraded, she was facing multiple charges, and I hadn't heard a whisper about her from anyone in our mutual circles. Then my phone rang Thursday evening with Daniel's number, and I could hear exhaustion in his voice. Marcus, we've got a problem. She's found someone new, and this kid is in way over his head. I sat down, already knowing this wasn't good news. What do you mean someone new? College kid named Tyler. 22, still lives in the dorms at State University. He contacted me through a mutual friend because he's been dating Jenna for 3 weeks and she's already demanding GPS tracking apps and passwords to all his social media accounts. The familiar pattern made my stomach drop. 3 weeks, and she was already implementing full control with someone who probably thought intense attention meant love. She badmouthed both of us to him, calling us abusive exes who couldn't handle a strong woman. Kid's smarter than she gave him credit for and decided to do research. Found my LinkedIn and reached out asking if I'd share my actual experience with her. Daniel arranged for us to meet Saturday morning at a downtown coffee shop. Tyler looked exactly like I'd expected, young, earnest, stress lines around his eyes that I recognized from my own mirror during the worst parts with Jenna. She seemed so into me at first, Tyler said, stirring his coffee nervously. Intensely interested in everything about my life. My class schedule, professors' names, where I hung out on campus. I thought it meant she really cared. When did the demands start? I asked, knowing the timeline would be depressingly familiar. Week 2. Said she'd been cheated on before and needed reassurance. Asked to see my text messages, then social media DMs, then wanted me to install an app that would let her track my location in real time. Daniel and I exchanged glances. The exact same progression. Start with reasonable sounding requests based on past trauma, then escalate to full surveillance when the victim was emotionally invested. I told her I wasn't comfortable with the tracking app, and she completely lost it. Started crying, saying I was just like all the other guys. Then she threatened to call my professors and tell them I was emotionally abusing her, maybe file a Title IX complaint with the university. The threat to involve his school was new, but the emotional manipulation was straight from her playbook. Tyler, has she mentioned any other ex-boyfriends besides me and Marcus? Daniel pulled out his phone. Yeah, actually. She's made references to a bunch of guys who couldn't handle her. Someone named Brett from college, a guy called Mike who she said tried to get her fired, and someone named Josh who she claimed stalked her after they broke up. We spent the next hour walking Tyler through our experiences while he shared disturbing details about their brief relationship. The pattern was almost clinical, love bombing for 2 weeks, followed by isolation tactics, surveillance demands, and threats when victims resisted. But the real revelation came when Daniel suggested creating a timeline. Tyler, do you know anyone else who might have dated her? My roommate's friend Alex dated her about 2 years ago. said she was crazy possessive and tried to get him kicked out of his apartment by calling his landlord with false complaints. And there's this guy Brett who works at the coffee shop near campus. He warned me to stay away from her when he saw us together. Daniel opened a spreadsheet and started entering names and dates. As the timeline took shape, a disturbing pattern emerged that went beyond what either of us had realized. Marcus, look at this. She's been cycling through guys for at least 7 years. Brett from 2018 to 2020, then Alex from 2021 to early 2023, then you from mid-2023 to early 2024, then me until a few months ago, and now Tyler. Each relationship lasted between 2 and 4 years, with brief overlap periods where she was apparently lining up her next victim before discarding the current one. Even more disturbing, Daniel's research showed that at least 3 previous boyfriends had gotten restraining orders, and one had to transfer colleges to escape her harassment. This isn't random relationship drama, I said, studying the timeline. This is systematic predatory behavior. She's targeting guys, using the same manipulation tactics, then moving on when they wise up or legal intervention forces her to back off. Tyler looked pale. So I'm just the latest guy in a 7-year cycle of abuse? You're the latest guy, but you're also the first one who figured it out in 3 weeks instead of 3 years, Daniel pointed out. That's actually progress. We documented everything. Tyler's experiences, contact information for other victims, and a comprehensive breakdown of her tactics. By the time we left, we had enough evidence to write a psychology textbook on predatory relationship patterns. Tyler, you need to cut all contact immediately, I advised as we walked to our cars. Block her on everything, document any contact attempts, and be prepared for escalation when she realizes you're not playing along. What if she follows through on her threats about my professors? Show them this documentation and explain you're being harassed by someone with a documented history of false accusations against multiple ex-boyfriends. Universities deal with this more often than you'd think. As I drove home, I felt validation and disgust. Validation because Tyler's experience proved my relationship with Jenna hadn't been normal problems. It had been systematic abuse. Disgust because she'd been doing this for 7 years, perfecting her techniques and leaving a trail of damaged men in her wake. The scariest part was realizing how close I'd come to being trapped for years instead of months. If I hadn't joined that hiking club and met Amy, if I hadn't had Daniel's warning, I might have ended up like Brett or Alex. Years of my life wasted on someone who saw me as nothing more than a resource to be exploited until something better came along. 4 months after the laptop incident, Amy and I had settled into the kind of easy rhythm I'd never thought possible. We'd been officially dating for 2 months, spending Saturdays hiking different trails, and I'd started keeping a toothbrush at her apartment without any dramatic conversations about what it meant. She made me feel like the best version of myself, someone worth listening to, someone whose opinions mattered, someone who deserved basic respect and kindness. We were grocery shopping at Kroger on Saturday afternoon, debating homemade pizza versus something simple for dinner, when I spotted them in the produce section. Jenna was standing next to Tyler, who looked even more stressed than at our coffee shop meeting, examining apples with the kind of intensity that suggested she was micromanaging his fruit selection. That's her, isn't it? Amy asked quietly, following my gaze. Yeah, that's Jenna. And the kid she's with is Tyler, the college student Daniel and I were trying to help. Should we leave? No, I said, surprising myself with how calm I felt. I'm not running away from buying groceries because my toxic ex-girlfriend happens to be here. We continued shopping, but I could feel Jenna watching us. Amy seemed completely unbothered, chatting about weekend plans and laughing at my terrible jokes like we were the only people in the building. When we ended up in the same aisle, the pasta section, ironically, Jenna made her move. Marcus, what a surprise seeing you here, she said in that artificially bright voice she used when performing normalcy for an audience. And you must be Amy. I'm Jenna, Marcus's ex-girlfriend. The introduction was designed to establish territorial claims and make Amy uncomfortable, but Amy just smiled politely. Nice to meet you, Jenna. Marcus has mentioned you. I hope he didn't say anything too terrible about me, Jenna laughed, glancing at Tyler for support. You know how men can exaggerate when relationships don't work out. Actually, he's been very respectful when your name comes up, Amy replied evenly. Mostly he just seems grateful that you two figured out you weren't compatible before things got more serious. The comment was perfectly calibrated, acknowledging our relationship had existed while making clear Amy didn't see Jenna as any threat. Jenna's smile became strained. Well, we were together for 3 years. That's pretty serious by most people's standards. but I suppose some people have different ideas about commitment. 3 years is definitely significant time, Amy agreed. I'm sure you learned a lot about what you want in a partner. That's valuable experience for your future relationships. She gestured toward Tyler. Tyler, right? Marcus mentioned you're studying at State University. What's your major? Tyler looked surprised to be addressed directly and kindly. Business administration. Hoping to focus on marketing. That's wonderful. My brother graduated from State's business program. Really solid reputation. Amy's genuine interest in Tyler as a person, rather than as Jenna's accessory, clearly rattled Jenna's control of the situation. Tyler's been so busy with school lately, Jenna interjected, wrapping her arm around him possessively. Sometimes I barely see him because he's always studying or hanging out with his guy friends. The comment was designed to make Tyler feel guilty for having a life outside their relationship. Having good friendships and focusing on school sounds like healthy priorities, Amy said warmly to Tyler. College years go by so fast, it's important to make the most of them. Other shoppers had started noticing our conversation, probably sensing the tension. Amy, could I talk to you for a minute? I asked, taking her hand. There's something I've been meaning to ask you. I led her a few steps away to the Apple display, my heart racing with a decision that felt completely right and completely spontaneous. Amy Chin, I said, getting down on one knee right there in the produce section, will you marry me? Will you build a life with someone who thinks you're amazing exactly as you are? Her face lit up with genuine surprise and joy. Yes, of course, yes. The small crowd that had gathered started applauding, including Tyler, who was clapping with what looked like genuine happiness. Someone nearby was filming with their phone, capturing Amy's laughter and my probably terrible grocery store proposal. Jenna stood frozen, watching her ex-boyfriend get engaged to someone else while her current boyfriend looked more excited about our engagement than anything involving her. Oh my God, said a woman near the organic vegetables, loud enough for everyone to hear. Isn't that the girl from the Facebook group? The one who stalks her ex-boyfriends. I saw Jenna's face go pale as other shoppers started looking at her with recognition. Yeah, that's definitely her, confirmed another woman, pulling out her phone. My friend's cousin dated her. She's crazy. The crowd's attention had shifted from celebrating our engagement to identifying Jenna as a local cautionary tale. Jenna grabbed Tyler's arm and practically dragged him toward the exit, but not before I heard her hissing at him about how this was all some elaborate scheme to humiliate her. Marcus, Amy said, still wearing the ring and smiling at the well-wishers, I think we just won the breakup. As we walked to check out with our groceries and congratulations from strangers, I realized that the best revenge against someone who tried to make me feel worthless was simply building something beautiful with someone who deserved it. 6 months later, Amy and I were planning our wedding when local journalist Sarah Williams reached out about a documentary she was producing on relationship abuse patterns in small communities. Daniel had connected her with our group after she'd interviewed him about a related story, and she was fascinated by the systematic nature of Jenna's behavior across multiple victims. What started as a piece about one problematic relationship turned into something much bigger when I realized this woman had been cycling through men for nearly a decade, Sarah explained during our interview. You, Daniel, Tyler, and 3 other men I've tracked down all experienced identical manipulation tactics. This isn't random, it's predatory behavior that needs to be documented. The documentary, titled The Pattern, aired on the local PBS station and was picked up by several domestic violence awareness organizations. Sarah had done incredible work tracking down Brett, Alex, and even Josh, Jenna's ex from college, each of whom shared eerily similar stories of emotional manipulation, financial exploitation, and escalating harassment when they tried to leave. Tyler had become an unexpected advocate, speaking passionately about how recognizing the pattern early had saved him from years of abuse. I was 3 weeks into what could have been a 3-year nightmare, he said in his interview. If Marcus and Daniel hadn't reached out, I'd probably still be installing tracking apps and apologizing for having friends. The documentary's impact was immediate and devastating for Jenna. Her dental practice, already struggling with her frequent absences due to court dates, received multiple calls from patients who recognized her from the program. Her supervisor called her in for a meeting about maintaining professional standards and placed her on unpaid leave pending review. But the most surprising development came from an unexpected source, Jenna's own family. Her sister called me 2 weeks after the documentary aired, introducing herself as Lisa and asking if we could meet. I had no idea how bad this had gotten, Lisa said over coffee, looking exhausted and embarrassed. Jenna always told us that her ex-boyfriends were abusive or crazy, that she was the victim in these situations. Seeing all of you men tell basically the same story, and seeing the evidence you documented, it made us realize we'd been enabling her behavior for years. Lisa explained that their parents had immediately confronted Jenna with an ultimatum: get professional help or lose family support entirely. She's in therapy now, real therapy, not just someone she can manipulate. And she's had to acknowledge what she did to all of you. The therapist said this kind of systematic behavior doesn't just happen, it's learned and reinforced over time. How is she handling that? I asked, genuinely curious despite everything. Not well. She's lost most of her friends, her job situation is precarious, and she's having to confront the fact that she's hurt a lot of people. But for the first time, she's not blaming everyone else for her problems. 3 months later, Amy and I got married in a small ceremony at Cascade Trail, the same place where I'd first found my footing after leaving Jenna. The hiking club had become our chosen family, with Daniel serving as my best man and Tyler reading a poem about finding your tribe. Amy's simple dress and wildflower bouquet looked perfect against the mountain backdrop, and her vows about building a life based on mutual respect and genuine partnership made several people cry happy tears. During the reception at the community center, Daniel pulled me aside with an update about Jenna. She's apparently doing the work in therapy. Her sister says she started acknowledging the harm she caused and is working on understanding why she developed these patterns. The therapist thinks it might take years to really change her behavior. Do you think people can actually change that much? I asked, watching Amy laugh with her new hiking club friends. I don't know, but I hope so. Not for our sake, we've all moved on. But maybe the next guy won't have to go through what we did. As Amy and I drove away from our reception, heading to a cabin in the mountains for our honeymoon, I thought about how different my life had become since that Tuesday night when I'd chosen to drive to REI instead of going back to apologize for something I hadn't done wrong. The woman sitting next to me, wearing her simple wedding dress and hiking boots, represented everything I'd learned about healthy relationships: partnership instead of ownership, support instead of control, love that built you up instead of tearing you down. 6 months later, we heard through mutual acquaintances that Jenna had moved to another state for a fresh start, apparently taking her therapy seriously and working to rebuild her life without the toxic patterns that had defined her for so long. I genuinely hoped she'd found peace and learned to form healthy relationships, but mostly I was grateful that her chaos was no longer my problem to solve. Tyler had transferred to a better university and was thriving academically and socially. Daniel had started dating someone new, a teacher who appreciated his straightforward honesty about his past experiences. And Amy and I had bought a house with a big backyard for the dog we were planning to adopt, still hiking every Saturday and building the kind of quiet, stable life that I'd once thought was boring but now recognized as precious. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply refusing to let someone else's dysfunction define your future and choosing to build something better with people who deserve your best self.